Okay, I'm going to do a little tutorial on writing loops and creating functions. I'm going to use some of the stuff we've already done in discussion, just in case you weren't able to catch it during discussion, and also I'll go through and talk through how you think up the code that you're going to need to write, just given the basic concept. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the loop that we talked about using to make calculate a factorial of a number, and turn that into a function, and then I'll use that in a while loop to calculate a value of e. So this is what you're given in discussion. If you just look up factorial, you can see what factorial of a number should be. So basically, see that? No, too far down. So factorial of n, say n exclamation mark, should equal n minus 1 times n minus 2. Oh, it should be n here. Times n minus 3 on down to 1. So 5 factorial would be 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, which is going to be 120. Okay, Matlab has a function for this built in. You go factorial 5. It'll give you 120. So there's really no need to write a function for factorial, but it should be illustrative on how to write your other functions, like those you need to write for your homework. So I'm going to click new script. Eventually I'm going to turn this into a function, but let's just start out as a script. We'll say n equals 5. And let's call n factorial, n fact, needs to start out at 1. Then we're going to keep multiplying that by numbers until we reach 5 to get factorial. So if you go and look, that is actually factorial 5. So we could either start at 5 and loop down to 1. It's just more compact code to start at 1 and loop up to 5. Actually, you don't need to start at 1 in this case, because, well, you probably would want to, just in case we calculate the factorial of 1. There's also another instance that we'll need to put an if statement in there for, and I'll explain that after I go through the loop. So, I mean, the way you'd think about this is you'd look at what you need. You need to have all these numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you want you want to create some number that becomes those each time it goes through a loop. So I'm going to call that number I. For I equals 1, and we're not just going to 5, we want to be able to change this 5 to anything, so I'm going to say 1 to n. And while it does that, I want to say n fact equals n fact times I. And end. Okay, I'm just going to run this just to show that it works, but before I do that, I'm going to have to give it some sort of name. Let's see, I'm going to put it in the folder junk. I'm going to call it Tony Fact. And I'm going to have to add that to the path. So I did that, and it should have calculated n fact, and it did, and it's 120, so everything worked. Good. So this is the bit that I bet would be somewhat confusing. The fact that I keep using this variable n fact, and I'm keep overriding it every time I go through the loop. So let's just walk through this in painful detail. So let's say when it goes into that loop, we have I equal to 1. When I is equal to 1, n is just going to be what it was because we haven't changed it. N equals 5. N factorial equals 1. Then we go into the loop, and the first line of code we get is n fact equals n fact times I. So all that is, we take this n fact, put it into here, this I, put it into there, and we just get 1 times 1, which equals 1. So then it hits the end in that loop and starts back over again, but now I is going to be equal to 2. I is equal to 2, n is still equal to 5. N fact is now equal to 1. It hasn't changed. So we go through this line of code one more time. N fact equals n fact times I. This time n fact is 1 again, but now I is 2. So this is equal to 1 times 2, which just becomes 2. Let's go through it one more time. I equals 3 now. We've hit that end, and now it goes back to the top, and still equals to 5. In fact, now equals 2. So just run that line of code. In fact equals n fact times I, which is going to be 2 times 3 is going to equal 6. So you just keep doing that, and n fact just keeps being replaced. So even though, I mean, it looks like we've got the same variable on the same side of the equation, it runs the right side of the equation first, and then it uses that result to say what the left side of the equation should become. Just one thing that I've seen students do a couple times: you would never write n fact times I equals n fact. That would not be right. Don't do that. You just have a single variable on the right-hand side, or the left-hand side, not the right-hand side. Okay, back to Matlab. So that is what our code is doing. I now want to change this from a script into a function where I will pass it the n. I'll give it the number I want to take the factorial of, and it'll return n fact. It'll return the factorial of that number. So, first line in every function has to be something that looks like this. It has to start with the word function. So I've got function, and then a function name should be the same as the file name. I've called it TonyFact. Sorry, TonyFact. That's going to be the name of the function. I have to pass it something, so I'm going to pass the function n. That's the number of which I want to take the factorial, and I want it to return something. So I'll say what I want it to return on the left-hand side of an equal sign. So n fact equals that. So I'm going to give it n. It's going to give me back n fact. Because I've done that, I should get rid of this n equals 5 here. I should not have any clear variable command in here or anything like that. I can put comments after this, but you wouldn't want to clear your variables because you've passed it n, you don't want to clear it. Okay, let's see, then the rest of it should be the same, but if I try to run this, it's not going to work. Because now I've told it that this function needs to be passed some value n. So now I'm going to run it down here in the command window. TonyFact, pass it 5, and it's returned 120. Which it should, but now I can pass it anything. I can pass it 4, pass it 9, and I can see if that's the right value using the Matlab built-in function. So if I go factorial 9, it should be the same, and it is the same. if I go factorial of 0, that should be 1. Let's see, if I go factorial of 0 with mine, it is 1. So everything is good. We can use this in our while loop now. So, very simple function. You're asked to make a function in your homework to take in a score and some other variable and spit out a grade. So you'd have the grade in place of nfact, that's what it would return, and then you'd pass it a score and then something else. You could call it whatever you wanted to. But if you're passing two things, you'd have the first one, comma, the second one, and that is how you would call that function. So I'm going to save this, start a new function that I'll call estimate E. It's not going to be a function. It'll just be a script. I was going to do a function, but we already did one. We don't need to do two. So I'm going to save this as estimate E in my junk folder. So there. How to calculate E? Just go right to the Wikipedia page and you can see the method that we use to estimate it in the discussion section. E equals the summation of 1 over n factorial. Oh. So, from n equals 0, that's important, to infinity of 1 over n factorial. So, that equals 1 over 1 factorial, or 0 factorial, plus 1 over 1 factorial, plus 1 over 2 factorial, plus 1 over 3 factorial, plus on to infinity. But we're not going to go to infinity, we're going to estimate E. We're going to go to a certain tolerated value of error and then stop. Okay. So, how to do this? So looking at the sequence, I mean, you can kind of see there's a pattern that we could use in this while loop. That's 0, 1, 2, 3. We could do a for loop and just loop through those numbers, but we want to stop at a particular error. To know what our error is, in your homework you're asked to do something a little bit different than you were asked to do in the discussion. You're asked to get an error that should be the difference between the true value of E and your estimated value. Fortunately, Matlab has a function exp that takes E, raises it to a certain power, so it's exp of 3, exp of 2. If I want just E, you can probably figure out it should be exp of 1. So true E equals exp of 1. Yeah, I'm going to, in your homework you're going to have a different value of maximum error based upon what you find in your for loop. I'm just going to set it in this problem. Error max equals 1, E minus 7, let's say. But it'll be different in yours. Okay. I'm going to do this with a while loop because I don't know when to stop. I don't know when we're going to have our error less than error max. So, I need to, in the while loop I need some condition. And the condition I'm going to have is while, I'm just going to call it error less than error max. Or no, while error greater than error max. I'm going to do whatever's in this while loop. I've seen a couple of you try to write this while statement. Oh, that error is used as a function. So let's just call it ERR. That's not used as a function. And then it crashes here because it has no idea what error is, even though you declare what it is in here. Error is going to be, let's call it EW for E from while loop minus true E. But it should be the absolute error, absolute value of that error. So even if you have it like this, it's not going to run. If I try to run it, it's going to crash because it has no idea what this variable ERR is. So I need to initialize that, and I want to initialize it as something that's above the maximum error. Infinity is definitely going to be above the maximum error. So now it should run. Oh, but yeah, we haven't calculated what EW would be, so we need to do that in here. So, E, back to this, should be the summation of 1 over n factorial. So let's start with an n. N needs to start at 0. We need to do some calculation with that, and then n needs to increment. And the calculation is just based upon the function we gave you. EW should equal EW plus, because of the summation, 1 divided by, and I'm going to use my function instead of the built-in one, should give me the same results. Tony fact of n. This isn't going to work because we need to initialize EW at something. Because the summation, the first value of EW should be 0. So the first time we go through this, it'll just be EW equals 0 plus 1 divided by factorial of n, which is 0. So that'd be 1 divided by 1. So EW will just equal 1 the first time we go through that loop. Next time n is 2. So EW equals EW, and then EW is now 1 plus 1 divided by 2 factorial, which is 1 divided by 2, so it's be 2.5. Okay. So let's see, if I run this, should this work, or have I forgot something? So it ran, and I got a good value of E. And what is my error? Very small value of error. It's smaller than the max error, which is what you'd expect because that's what it took to break out of the loop. So that is basically what you did in discussion. It's kind of what you're going to do in your homework. Let me try to walk you through these steps piece by piece in hopes that it will make more sense. So let's start with the first time we enter that while loop. Our error is infinite, and that is going to be greater than error max, so of course we're going in there. Our EW is going to be 0 because that's what we initialized it as, and our n is 0, that's what we initialized that as well. When we take n factorial, factorial of 0 is 1. So we enter this first line inside the while loop, and we get the new EW is going to equal the old EW, which is 0 plus 1 divided by the factorial of n, which is 1. So that's just going to become 1. So we go through that, n equals n plus 1, so now n, the new n is 1, and the new n factorial is going to be 1 as well. And then the error is going to become 1 minus 2.718, so 1.718 repeating. So that's not less than our maximum. So we have to go into the loop again. The new EW on that first line of code in the loop is going to equal the old EW, which that comes from there, that goes from there. The old EW was 1 plus 1 divided by factorial of n is 1, factorial of 1 is 1, and so that is going to be 2. 1 plus 1 is 2. And then n equals n plus 1, so that's 2, and n factorial is 2. And the error is going to be 0.718 repeating. That's still bigger than the maximum, so we go through the loop again. EW equals the old EW, so we take that from there. That's going to be 2 plus 1 divided by n factorial, 1 divided by 2, n equals n plus 1, 3. 3 factorial is going to be 6. And so 2 plus 1/2, EW is going to be 2.5. And that's going to be 0.218, and so on. And we keep doing this until the error gets small enough. In which case, let's see, how many times did we do this? Did it 11 times before the error got small enough that we could stop. So, just a couple things I want to make sure are clear. That, you know, even though you have EW on both sides of that line of code, it starts on the right side using the old EW. The old EW keeps getting used in that equation to find the new EW. And the n factorial keeps getting used in that equation in that denominator. Each time it goes through the loop, and that'll just keep on going. Okay, I think that's as painfully detailed as I can describe this process. If you have any questions, come talk to us.